Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meets civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Boerne ISD trustee and owner of the Boerne Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Boerne City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Cisneros.
Welcome to Ceasefire. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Cisneros.
And today we're going to try and poke a stick at some lightning rods and hopefully not get in too much trouble and not go too far off the rails. But we are going to talk about something close and important to everybody's heart. DEI.
And affirmative action.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think at the end of this, we can conclude that they're really talking about the same thing, although I went to AI and I said, hey, what are the differences between the two? Because from my simple mind, they were very similar. And
so I'm talking to a computer now, right?
Yeah. You're
okay.
I am truly artificial intelligence. Oh, gosh. But yeah, affirmative action, according to AI, primarily addresses historical injustices and underrepresentation of specific groups, e.g. racial minorities and women. Legal basis, often mandated by law or executive order. Scope, narrower, focusing on specific demographics and remedial measures. DEI, on the other hand, and then again, this is according to AI, creates a more inclusive and equitable environment for all individuals, regardless of background, by addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Legal basis, not typically legally mandated. To that I say, ha. And scope, broader, encompassing a holistic approach to inclusivity, including addressing unconscious bias, promoting cultural competence, and valuing diverse perspectives.
Somebody wrote that.
Yes.
Okay, so from what I get from that is that affirmative action directly promotes the changing of priorities to achieve the objectives.
Mm-hmm.
DEI doesn't say that. It just talks about broadening who's included, but doesn't specifically say we're going to change our priorities at our job or position or whatever environment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
But I think they end up in the same place.
I do believe so.
Yeah.
I do believe so. And to add weight to what you just said, I want to cover the history of affirmative action, which, oddly enough, when I was doing research on the history of DEI, it all points back to the history of affirmative action, which goes to my point earlier that they're really, I think, in the end, the same thing. Yeah. I think that one word falls out of favor or one phrase falls out of favor, and so they come up with a new, shinier, glossier term, and then that falls out of favor. And in about 5 years, there's going to be a new term that basically means the same thing as DEI and affirmative action. Yeah. So here's the history of it. The first time the words affirmative action were used together was in Executive Order number 10925, signed by President John F. Kennedy on March 6, 1961. And that executive order was a provision that government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin.
So that wasn't a pronouncement of a change of priorities. It was just a protection of minorities.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so far, I'm like, okay, all right, and no problem there. Then in 1964, we get the Civil Rights Act, which expressly says that we're going to prohibit discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I think most people say, yeah, that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds like the foundational principles of our nation, right?
Yeah.
In 1965, at this point now, we're in President Johnson, he issues Executive Order 11246, which required the government employers to hire without regard to race, religion, and national origin, and, quote, take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, color, religion, sex, or national origin.
So you're still not promoting one over the other at this point?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, I think even in this one, it still seems okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So at what point did something come out that said, okay, it's time to promote one race over another or gender over another?
That starts happening with quotas, and we start seeing more and more of that. So this, I think, gets misinterpreted, where I think the original intent is that, look, you can't say no to hiring Latinos. You can't say no to hiring blacks. You can't say no to hiring women. Or if somebody's a Sikh or a Baptist or a Jew, you can't say no to them. You're an atheist. And that's all fine. But at some point, and we start seeing some of these cases come up in the 70s, people start saying, I need to hire a certain number of blacks. I need to hire a certain number of Mexican Americans. I don't know that these executive orders said need. They just said that you can't.
Did that start in the public sector or the private sector? Do you know?
I think in the public sector from what I was reading, and then it moved over into the private sector. And I'm actually glad that you asked about that, because there is, here recently, we've seen like in the last 10 years, the private sector start pushing these, what we now call DEI, these requirements. And the NFL, for example, has rigid quotas for minorities.
For the players?
No, actually for the leadership positions. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that takes me into some numbers that I want to share with you all. So the NFL has these DEI requirements that they want a certain number of women and a certain number of blacks or other minority groups in leadership positions. That does not translate to the field. Now, this is interesting because on the field, 53.5% of all players are black. Now, these numbers are as of 2023. Okay. Now, at the same time, the coaching is only 18% led by blacks. So the players make up over half of all players. And by the way, the white players were only 28% on the field. So about a little more than a quarter, and then the rest were different ethnic backgrounds. Yeah. But I thought that's interesting. So what does that look like if we move down into the high school level? So what are the number of black players in high school? This was really strange. Black players constitute about 40% of all participants in high school football.
So more than get promoted or make it to the national level.
They overrepresent their numbers in the general population. Blacks only account for about 13% of the U.S. population. So if all things were equal, then they'd be about 13% of all the players on a high school football team and about 13% of the NFL, but they're not. They're 40% of high school football players and over 50% of NFL players. And I found this from another study. They're 3 times more likely than white youth to play tackle football, often driven by the pursuit of college and professional opportunities.
Scholarships.
So
Cool, yeah.
So this... I'm going to jump all over the map here, but I'm going to go back to a Supreme Court case, and this is 2023, yes. And this is Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard.
Yeah, yes, I remember this.
You remember this, right?
Asians, right?
Asians, yeah. So what was happening here is that Harvard, they had a high number of Asian students, particularly Chinese American students, who would test really high and because of their testing results could get admitted into Harvard. And blacks would not test at the same level. So what Harvard did is they developed a way of measuring these students on a personality test, and they would meet with them. And
their personality would be a factor.
Their personality was a factor. And what they found that Asian applicants as a racial group, and I'm reading this direct from the study, received consistently weaker personal scores over the period surveyed. African Americans, on the other hand, consistently scored the lowest on the academic rating, but highest on the personal rating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now my problem with affirmative action, and so I just announced it right there. I have a problem with affirmative action, right? I am... sometimes, or in one point in my life, it would have been considered a minority. I don't think I'm considered a minority anymore, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Not here in Boerne, anyway. We all know
not here in Boerne, yeah. But I think that the problem with affirmative action is it's always never really addressed the root problem.
Yeah.
It's lowered the bar for admission into anything, into sports, into college, into employment. My question is, if blacks were not testing at the same level as Asians,
check out their schools.
What is wrong with their high school?
Yes.
What is wrong with their middle school? Why is it that black students, your young black men, are 3 times more likely to pursue a career in football, which I mean, your chances of getting into the NFL, your chances of playing for a D1 college football team are really low. But then getting from there into the NFL are even lower. Whereas it seems like Asian parents are telling their kids, you're going to focus on the STEM courses. You're going to be science, technology, math. We're not going to put all of our eggs in the low chance basket of you playing for a professional sports team.
Yeah.
We want you to get into a good university. The same with, we were talking, I think, in last week's episode about city elections, and I want to bring that back up again for just a second. We now have districts in the city, and we've had them for many years now, but we used to have this cumulative voting where, as a result of elections, a lawsuit with LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. And the idea behind that was that we were going to get more Hispanic representation if we had cumulative voting. It never worked out. And they eventually went back to the city of Boerne and did an amended settlement agreement saying, look, that didn't work. We want districts now. And we think districts will actually help us, single member districts will help us achieve that quota. And I remember I was sitting as a participant not as a councilman. I was in the audience watching this debate take place, and the city attorney at that time was arguing that this would increase Hispanic representation on the council. And I thought that was a bunch of hooey. I never believed that. But I also thought it was insulting.
Yeah.
In fact, I've always found affirmative action insulting because it basically argues that
You can't do it yourself.
you can't do it yourself. You need our help.
Yes.
We need to lower that bar for you. You're just not as smart as those Asian kids.
Yeah.
You're just not the same quality of voters as the white people. We got to change the rules so that you can get representation.
Yeah.
You're different.
Yeah. And that's the big fault with affirmative action and quotas, is that it takes away a person's, their statement of their life that they are capable.
Right.
Now they're dependent on somebody else to say that they're capable because of their minority status.
Yeah.
Instead of them just going out there doing whatever job they're doing or accomplishing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's time for a break.
We're going to take a quick break here. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We'll be right back and we'll dig into it some more. Boerne has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Boerne Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Boerne Bookshop, and we pride ourselves on finding what you're looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Boerne Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Boerne at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Boerne Bookshop. Welcome back. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, and we've been talking about affirmative action and DEI, and I just have a little bit that I want to talk about.
All right.
Lately, it's been trashed, and their companies are pulling out of it, and all this other kind of thing. And I think part of it's politics, but I think some of it also might be that people are realizing that it's really not helping them much by having these programs. And I think that comes down to the difference between the one-liner of a concept and the reality of a concept. And so the one-liner of the affirmative action is, let's let everybody work and be fair. And the reality is you end up with quotas, you end up diminishing people's ability to advance on their own, and they have to be helped along. Well, DEI, I think, is very similar. And I'm going to take this one word at a time. They're talking about diversity, and yet what do you have to have in order to have diversity? You have to have labels, because you can't have diversity if you don't have a different label for different people. So diversity forces you to create labels on people, forces you to put people in boxes, and that's the epitome of stereotyping people. And so I think one reason it's failed is because it's really hard to put most people in boxes and labels, because most people don't fit those boxes and labels. And trying to force everybody is corrupting to the society. And so diversity on its face doesn't work. Equity, what is that about? That's about the removal of meritocracy. It means paying people based on something other than their performance. And that's un-American, even though we do lots of it here. And so the equity, I know they're trying to get good outcomes for all kinds of people, but you have to have merit. You have to be able to evaluate people based on what they're capable of doing and what they actually do in their life. And if you say, no, that doesn't matter, then you undermine what everybody does, because everybody does what they think is important, and that undermines it. And then inclusivity, the one-liner is, yes, we want everybody included, but the reality is you have to celebrate everybody. And celebrating people is different from including them. And the whole push has been that you celebrate every different type of person. People want to celebrate themselves. They want to celebrate lots of things, but they don't want to be forced to celebrate everybody and everything. And forcing people is just not our way. So that's why I think the whole thing has just fallen apart, because every aspect of this has been corrosive to a prosperous society.
And I think there's another word we need to talk about, and this is when we talk about DEI and affirmative action, this is the unspoken elephant in the room. But what they're trying to achieve is to get all of these other minority groups to the level of white people.
Or they're trying to bring the prosperous people down to the level of everybody else, as long as there's equity.
Right, as long as there's equity, exactly. So what I wanted to do was break down the word white. Who is white, right? Who is white?
Yeah.
And I think what I have found is that the people that are included in the term white has expanded over the years.
Anybody that's prosperous.
Anybody that's prosperous. Exactly. It's like you're reading my mind. That's why we do a great radio show together.
Asians are considered, what do they call them? White supporting people or something, or pseudo-white? I don't know what they call them, but come on.
Yeah. So I looked up the term white. I was curious, when did this term come about? And first off, according to contemporary anthropologists and other scientists, white, or the white race, is a social construct. There's no scientific basis for it, right? Now, we can go back in a couple hundred years or even 100, 150 years ago, and we've got all the pseudosciences that try and distinguish the white race, right? But there really is no such thing. And what we have found historically is that some people thought of white as basically descendants of the British Empire, and they even distinguish between the English and the Irish, right? There's basically a whiter white. And that was really decided upon by the language. Was there English a form of Germanic English or the Gaelic? And so you had all these little subtle differences to carve out a little group.
Because people love to tribalize everybody.
But as you said, prosperity, as the Irish, the Italians, Spaniards, as they gained in prosperity, they got folded into that concept of white. And we've seen that here recently with Latinos as they have shifted politically to the right, that they're now starting to be excluded from that minority group. And let's talk about another minority group that comes in under the white umbrella, whatever that is. And this is a group it's an ethnic minority, it's a religious minority, and they don't ever get considered as a protected minority group. And we're talking about Jews.
Yes.
Jews, right there with the blacks when it comes to in terms of historical suffering.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other group off the top of my head that had 6 million people slaughtered in World War II, right? Yeah. And yet, they are part of that oppressive white community. I'm like, okay, that doesn't jive. That almost proves to me that white is just a term for prosperous.
That's interesting. That's an interesting bringing together the two concepts.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you know that the Harvard used to discriminate against the Jews just the way they do about the Asians now? Back in the 1920s, they had these quotas to keep the Jews out.
That doesn't surprise me. I found this quote from Senator Hubert Humphrey, and this was he said this when we were having the debates about the Civil Rights Act in 1964, quote, "I will eat my hat if this leads to racial quotas," end quote. He's not around anymore, but if he were, I would be presenting him with a hat.
Yeah.
A little salt and
pepper. He was probably still alive when he should have eaten that hat.
Oh, I would think so.
Yeah,
I would
if he
think
ever
so.
did. Cooked it up in a stew or something like that, maybe. Straw hat, maybe. Make some oatmeal out of it. So what is the solution if there's concern about minorities being oppressed? And I don't mean necessarily immigrants that come over where the first generation is trying to prove themselves but ones that have been around for a while, and they're just not getting a fair shake in our society. What's the solution if you don't step in and say, okay, you have to hire exactly the same percentages in the population?
Assimilation, I think, is the key. My mom came here from Cuba as a teenager and did not speak English. And when they came over, and she never really liked to talk about this, but under communism, they lost everything. But she came over, her family worked the orange fields in Florida. So they were picking oranges, and then later on she got a job at Burger King. And there was no advancement for her until later when she learned English, went to college, got a degree, she married my dad first, and then learned to drive. He taught her how to drive, and then went to college, got a degree, and started teaching. So she assimilated and fully accepted American culture and became an American citizen. And I think that is the key. And I think once that happens, once you assimilate into American culture, all of those opportunities are open to you. Whether or not you'll achieve the same level of success as my mom did, there's no guarantee of that. I think that's up to your own gumption, your own desires.
But assimilation is another one of those bad words, isn't it? Everybody wants, or I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people seem to push for everybody to stick with their own culture and not become American.
No, I don't think my mom lost her identity as a Cuban. I think her culture stuck with her throughout all of that assimilation. And what I see now in my adult life, when I entertain and have friends over, and I'm preparing Cuban meals that I learned from my mother, and all of my
yummy
white friends, they love that food. They love the Cuban coffee. So I think that inclusivity is the end goal. Assimilation is the answer. That's how you get included. And that's not saying that everybody has to love grandma, watch baseball, and eat apple pie. I think the definition of what is American has changed radically over the last 200 years, so much so that we see things like pizza and tacos as uniquely American. And those American ideas, you and I have traveled together to Argentina and Iceland, and we've seen the effects of American culture in other countries. It's startling. You know?
Pizza gets to Iceland via America.
Yeah,
tacos.
So do tacos.
We,
in the grocery stores, all of the American products. It's, oh my gosh! It's like we're taking a little bit of Cuban culture, a little bit of Mexican culture, and we're taking a little bit of everybody's culture. We put our American spin on it and say, this is who we are.
Yeah. One thing you said that was interesting. You said your mom was able to assimilate into American culture but not lose her Cuban culture. I think that brings up what is American culture, and I don't think it's what a lot of people think it is, because it has changed. We now eat pizza and tacos. 100 years ago, nobody ate pizza and tacos in America.
Yeah.
Before the various immigrant groups came here. American culture is not based on what you eat or what songs you're singing. It's a conceptual thing. That's what's unique about America, is we're not based on blood or heritage. We're based on beliefs in our Creator gave us the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is what we assimilate into when we come to America, that everybody gets out there and strives and works hard and has a right to go out and pursue their dreams. And other countries just don't have that. I mean, I don't care how progressive or wonderful you think some of these countries are, and they have wonderful cultures. I love going and seeing these other countries. I travel a lot. But this is the only place where the heart of your culture is about pursuing your dreams.
Yeah.
And that's the assimilation that happens here. Yeah.
Taco Tuesday. It's like across the United States. You bring your culture into the United States, and it gets absorbed into this idea of American identity.
Yeah, I go through so many cultures in a day. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm eating a collection of cultures.
Yeah.
It's great. So let's go ahead and talk about a book. And this is not directly related to what we're talking about, but Vivek Ramaswamy is running for Ohio governor, and he's an intriguing character. I'm not sure what I think about him yet, but he's very intriguing, and he's written a fair bit about woke stuff and DEI and all that kind of stuff, and he's got a book out that just came out called Truths, and it's the future of America first. And we got it at the Boerne Bookshop, and it's just an interesting book that I think helps us to understand his point of view, and he may be around for a while. It'll be interesting to see. I just thought it might be it's a political book.
Sounds good. Hey, folks, if you like what you hear on the show and you want to get some more of it, Dale and I would like to invite you to Whiskey and Wisdom, a new book club that started late last year, and we meet every other month.
And that would be the third Thursday of June, August, October, and December.
Please join us. We're going to have an assortment of whiskeys there and a great conversation about a very interesting book. Hope to see you there.
Okay. And that is it for today. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. Thank you for listening to us. And if you missed any of it, you can hear our podcast at BoerneyRadio.com.
See you next week.
Bye-bye. Boerne has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Boerne Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Boerne Bookshop. We pride ourselves on finding what you're looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Boerne Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Boerne at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Boerne Bookshop.